world falls apart, don't forget how to sing. Let's talk about it with Kris DenBesten on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
And as always, we're glad you're here. You always have a place at our table. If you're wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter is our executive producer, and he's here. Matthew, you said someone recently compared you to Hemingway.
Yeah, they said, you're no Hemingway.
And what did you say to that?
I said, Mom.
Our producer Jinx is working hard in his little glass booth. As soon as it's pumpkin spice latte season, Jinx immediately finds the closest Starbucks and then drives right past it.
Right on past it. On my way to get an Oktoberfest from Sam Adams. What's that?
A political statement, right?
Absolutely. Pumpkin spice is the devil.
Our video director and one-man IT department, John Myers, is in his tech bunker. It's now October, so I assume most of the planning is done for John's Christmas light show.
Probably.
He's not here to answer. Well, he's here, but he doesn't.
He's out hanging the lights up.
He's got a light show that covers his house, and his neighbors want to kill him. But the Muslim neighbor who lives across the street thinks it's wonderful. And so John thinks as long as that's true, he's safe. Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. George says you can tell it's fall in Florida by the leaves, because by October, the last tourist here leaves. That's so bad, Matthew. And then Kathy Wyatt is the soft feminine side of the program. Kathy is convinced Matthew is saving the funny intros for our upcoming live show. That's going to be in October, and I think most of you have gotten a card on that date. And we sure do hope you're able to show for that. We've never done that before. That's the card. If you don't have it, let us know. We'll make sure you get one. And that's going to be a launch for one of the great books of Christendom. That would be my book. And if you believe that, you believe anything.
Oh, good. We're serving lunch.
We are.
We got a great guest today, Kris DenBesten. Kris has been on with us before, and we talk mostly about business and Jesus. And we're glad he came back. Some refuse, but he's a brave man and decided to do this anyway. In our last program with Kris, he told us a story about his daughter, Gracyn, and how horrible it was. And he never told us what happened at the end. And so we've been sitting here, wonder if she's dead or alive all these weeks. And so we invited him back to tell us. Kris is a husband, father, author. He serves as CEO for Vermeer Southeast Sales and Service, a construction equipment business. Kris has written 3 books, and arguably the most personal of those is the one we're discussing today. And it's titled Gracyn's Song, A Journey from Facing Crisis to Finding Hope. Kris, thanks very much for being with us again.
Hey, it's great to be back. And I'm glad you guys cared enough to find out whether she lived
Yeah, right. Listen, that is kind of funny. You know, I didn't realize it until you mentioned it that we kind of left it hanging in that last program. And we didn't talk a lot about the story, but some.
Yeah.
But this time, I wish you would share that time with us and that story. It's quite moving and it's quite scary.
Yeah, it was. It's that crucible of faith that you end up with. You know, I mean, hopefully you don't end up with a lot of those, but you know, it ends up being that time in your life where you knew you had to give it all over to the Lord and trust Him. So, big moment in our family's life. It was 2008, and you know, really busy at the time running the business. Had 3 kids, 9, 11, and 7. So a lot going on. And it was actually Christmas time, 2008. And actually Gracyn was supposed to sing at First Baptist Orlando on Christmas Eve for their service that they do there with the candlelight. And she was really looking forward to that. However, you know, like a week or so prior, she was pretty sick. So Robin took her to my wife, Robin, took her to the doctor, and they go, "Oh, she's just got what everybody has, a little cold," and they gave her a breathing treatment and sent her home. But by Christmas Eve, the morning of Christmas Eve, she couldn't hardly even get out of bed. She was feeling so poorly. In fact, her hands had gotten frozen. I could feel her hands, and they were just really cold. So Robin took her back to the pediatrician, and before I knew it, she was calling me from an ambulance and saying, "You've got to get over to Arnold Palmer Hospital because the doctor immediately sent her there, and I don't know what's going on. So that's where we're headed. Can you meet us there?" And that's where on Christmas Eve, we got some really terrible news. A virus had attacked her heart. And that's a condition called viral myocarditis. And they shared with us that 1/3 of the people that happens to, if it's not too bad, they can, you know, recover from it. 1/3 will need a heart transplant and 1/3 will die. So, you know, pretty shocking. You have a normally completely her whole life healthy young lady at 9 years old to hear that prognosis on a Christmas Eve. And, you know, actually one of her first questions was, "Am I going to get to sing today, you know, at church?" Because she was really looking forward to that. And as the day went on, she continually went downhill. You know, we were praying that she'd be in that good 1/3 as the doctors gave us, you know, 3 scenarios. We prayed for the good 1/3 that she'd survive and with complications, but be okay. And it was around 8:00 at night when we realized she wouldn't be in that good 1/3. She was growing delirious, saying crazy things, and wasn't getting enough oxygen to her brain. And they said, "We need to put her on a breathing tube." And as they began to do that procedure, the last words I heard her say before was, "I'm going to die." And that's like the worst thing a parent can possibly hear their child say. And Robin was there, and a mom just wants to hug her baby and say it's going to be okay, but she couldn't do that. And a dad, especially a type A that tries to make things happen. I was standing there going, "I have to do something for my daughter. She's literally dying in front of me." But there was absolutely nothing that we could do in that moment. So they asked us to leave the room and put her on a breathing tube. They actually came back and said, "You need to go home, you know, get a little sleep if you can, come back in the morning." So we did that, came back on Christmas Eve morning. And it's now we say that's when we got the greatest Christmas gift of our lives, because she was on full life support. She wasn't getting any better. And the doctor pulled us aside and said, "There's nothing we can do for your daughter. There's no medicine. There's no procedure. This machine can keep her alive for a little while, but she's going to have to heal herself." And in that moment of greatest angst that a parent could possibly have is when we got that gift. When the doctor said there's nothing that we can do, what I heard is only God can do this. And as I was talking to Robin later, we were hugging and crying and praying. And And I told her that, and she goes, you know what I heard when the doctor said there's nothing we can do? I heard she's not in the doctor's hands anymore. She's in my hands. And we together realized that if Gracyn was not coming back to us, that she was in God's hands, that she was exactly where she belonged, that she was in the hands of the one who created her. And there was just this peace that passes all understanding. It's, it was the Christmas gift beyond all Christmas gifts to have that peace in that moment. We'll never forget that gift. And we did continue to pray wholeheartedly that God would bring her back to us. But we knew if he didn't, that it was going to be okay. So a few days went by. She wasn't getting any better. They brought us in and they said, there's a doctor at the University of Florida that's done some experimental procedures. And there's a device called the Berlin heart. And we think you'd be a candidate for that. It's not approved by the FDA, but we think you'd be a candidate of it. So we prayed about that. And that became our next journey of faith, was to allow her to become a medical experiment.
Kris, hold it right there. You don't want to miss the rest of this story. It's from the book, and you ought to get this book. It's not just the story. There's profound biblical wisdom that comes from it when you're facing your own difficult time. It's called Gracyn's Song, and it's written by Kris DenBesten. Don't go away. Hey, we're so glad that you're with us. We're talking to Kris DenBesten, and his book is titled Gracyn's Song, A Journey from Facing Crisis to Finding Hope. Unless you live in another universe, you're going to face a crisis, and multiple ones over a lifetime. And most of the time, it just brings confusion and darkness and tears and fear. But if you're a believer, you don't have to do all that. There's a road to follow. And Kris is telling us the story. And then when we finish the story, which has a good ending, sometimes crises don't, we're going to look at some of the wisdom, biblical wisdom, that comes from this kind of crisis. Okay, Kris, she's in a hospital. She's not doing good. The doctor says he can't do anything. And then you were given a Christmas gift. You can start there.
Yeah, the Christmas gift being that peace that passes all understanding, to know that she was going to be okay, even if she didn't come back to us. But they sent us, they put her on full life support in a helicopter and flew her to the University of Florida at Shands Hospital to become a medical experiment on a machine called a Berlin heart, a machine that could keep her alive while she waited for a heart transplant. However, there was a lot of recovery that needed to happen to her because she'd been in a coma for a number of days and all her vitals, organs had basically shut down. And we just began to pray, continuously for a miracle. One of the things they told us is that she may not walk again. She may not even speak again because a blood clot had broke free and gone to her brain, and they feared she had suffered a stroke and that she wouldn't even be able to have a heart transplant if that were the case. So we just prayed for the simplest of things, like let her move her leg, let her speak again, Lord, let her, those type of things. And if you recall, the last words I heard her say was, "I'm going to die." And
whoa.
The next words that I heard her say after she recovered from the surgery, that putting that Berlin heart machine, putting her on that was miraculous in itself. And she began to heal from it and began to come out of her coma and moved her left side and then tried to speak. And it just apparent that the Lord was all over this process. But the words she said that I'll never forget was in a very weak voice. She just looked at me and said, "Daddy, I love you." From I'm going to die to "Daddy, I love you." And again, we just knew that this was all God, and we just continued to follow him step by step. I'd like to say it got easy from there, but it didn't. Every day was a spiritual, emotional, physical battle. Imagine a 9-year-old girl wakes up in a hospital, hooked up to a machine, doesn't know if she'll ever get out of the hospital, doesn't really fully understand everything that's going on, is recovering from just, the machine's allowing her body to heal. But knowing she needs a heart transplant, it was a journey beyond any other. And but some really good things happened. For one, I had once prayed that nothing bad would ever happen to our kids because I was worried if my wife, Robin, would be able to handle it. I figured I could handle about anything, but I think it'd be so hard on her. But let me tell you something, her faith was so incredible and encouraging. And she would walk through the intensive care unit of the hospital singing praise songs. And everybody knew it was her daughter on the experimental machine. It was her daughter that needed the heart transplant. It was her daughter that, if anybody should be walking around singing praise songs, it wouldn't be her. But it was so incredible. She was such a light and shared Jesus with parents, in a place like that. It's just such a sad place. Kids are in there dying or they're near death. And just her ability to share Jesus in that situation was incredible. Over time, it was just a waiting process. The worst thing was the waiting. Gracyn would say, when am I going to get out of here? And we couldn't give her an answer. It was one of the very toughest things. We continually used Jeremiah 29:11. God has a plan for you. He has a plan to prosper you, not to harm you, but to give you hope and a future. That became our pillar verse of, we're just going to sit here. We can't tell you when, but we're trusting God to work his plan. And it was actually April 15, which business people know as tax day. I never look at it as that anymore. They called and said, "We think we may have found a heart for your daughter." And a day like that is hard to describe. It's so many emotions, so many things going through your mind. We went to the hospital. We actually brought our whole family up. And as they were beginning to prepare her to go in for the surgery, they had to tell you, all the things that could go wrong, including it may not work, you may die on the operating table, all those things that can happen. And, I prayed the dad prayer, make sure everything goes perfect, Lord, and help the doctors be perfect, help the heart to be perfect. And we're supposed to make our requests known to the Lord. And believe me, I did it with everything I had. But it so contrasts what she prayed that day, knowing she was the one that was going to have a new heart put in her chest, her original heart cut out. She said, "Dear God, thank you that you may have sent me a heart, and I pray that it would heal me. But I want you to know, even if it doesn't work out how I want it to, God, I'm still going to trust you." How often do we pray like that? We're pretty good, I think, at least me, at telling God what we want and praying for that. But to say, if it doesn't work out the way I want it to, I'll still trust you. That's the faith of a child. That's the faith that can move mountains. That's the kind of faith he uses to move our mountains for us. And, I'm glad to say that the heart transplant did go well. She was 9 at the time. She got the heart of a 15-year-old boy who had died. We don't know how or who or any of that stuff. But his family gave the amazing gift of life through letting his heart go to someone, and it went to my little girl. By May 1, she came home from the hospital. So just a couple weeks after getting a new heart, she's back home. And we had Christmas on May 1 that year. because it was Christmas Eve that she'd gone into the hospital and the presents were still under the tree. And, it was an unforgettable experience, an unforgettable celebration to do that. Still chokes me up.
Wonderful story. But this kind of story isn't just a story. It's a story for us to think about, to contemplate and say, was God in this? And if he was, how was he in it? And if my daughter had died, would God still be in it? There's hope. There's some good stuff on the other side of the break. The name of the book is Gracyn Song, and it's by Kris and Gracyn DenBesten. And guys, don't go anywhere. Like Jesus, we're going to return. Hey, we're so glad you're with us. If you've been with us the last two segments, you've heard an amazing story about Kris and Robin's daughter and the heart transplant that she finally got. And now she knows how to sing, and she sings for Jesus. By the way, one of the things that Kris said was during this crisis, they had scripture and prayers, and there's a little book that you can get. It's called Crisis Survival Guide, and you can get it free if you go, and especially you'll want it if you're going through your own personal crisis. It's shinevision.com, shinevision.com, and it will be just a nice little handbook to keep by your bedside when it gets really dark and it gets really hard.
Kris, thanks first of all for taking all of these experiences and then taking the next step of putting it into a book that can bless other people. I was moved throughout reading it. I have kids. I have a 9-year-old girl. It's impossible to not identify with what you guys are going through and ask yourself what you would do if you were in that spot. I wonder if you would speak a little bit to that book writing process and what it was like to revisit those incidents. When was it, how far from 2009 was that written, and just kind of what was that experience like of putting all of this into print?
Sure. Well, we kind of took the top 10 things we felt like we learned in that crisis, and each one was a chapter, and I would write my experience of it. And then at the end, Gracyn would add the perspective of the one who went through it, but at that time, a 9-year-old. And that everybody says that's the best part of the book. I, should have just done that. But yeah, it was great because, when something like this happens, it's our role to share it with others. And, the idea that, we've been through this crisis, hopefully we can help the next person that goes through a crisis. And it may not be a heart transplant, it may be financial, but we're all facing these crises, and the answer is the same every time. It's trust God no matter what, like she said in her prayer. Even if it doesn't work out how I want it to, I'm still going to trust you. That's what you need to make it through any crisis.
And don't draw the wrong lesson from what Kris has told in this story. That if you're religious and you use certain verses and you pray certain prayers, then your crisis will turn out the way you want it to.
Correct.
If you missed the first two segments, Kris made very clear that And not only did he make it clear, but his daughter said it. If she had not pulled through, had not gotten a heart, had died, God is still faithful, and he's still good all the time.
Amen.
Kris, that was when she was 9, and Gracyn is how old now?
Oh man, she's 22.
Yeah, wow.
In fact, you got to hear
wow.
this. June 5 of last year, she got married. Yeah,
that's a tragedy. We had anything. They're all gorillas.
She got a new heart, then she gave it to some boy.
Yeah. No, here's the deal. Literally, we had prayed that she'd have a wedding day when we didn't know if she'd have another day. So that was an amazing answer to prayer. But she asked me to officiate her wedding. So not only did I have to give her away, I had to officiate her wedding. But what a blessing! It was one of the greatest days of my life for sure.
Kris, I wanted to ask you, and you might be able to answer the whole thing or coming up on a break fairly soon, but you might have to go to the other side of the break. But in something as difficult as this, just from a physical standpoint, I mean, you're taking out of a body, I mean, the thing that makes somebody stay alive, and you're replacing that. And obviously there are anti-rejection meds and all kinds of stuff and everything. Has she had any kind of issues throughout? Is she just as healthy as possible? Does she have any kind of restrictions or whatever that she's had to, learn to adjust to in order to be able to do, life the way you do it? I mean, she's married now, I mean, I'm sure she's, talking about a family at some point in the future and all of that. I mean, that's a lot. That's huge.
Yeah. She's on prescription drugs for the rest of her life. The anti-rejection drugs, obviously she has to take those so that her body doesn't attack that heart that is in essence foreign to it. And along with that, there's some different things that offset, to keep the blood pressure right, these kind of things. So it's an ongoing medical process. She goes in every year and they check her out, and she has been blessed in that she's been extremely healthy. It was really good that she was healthy before this happened because it helped her with her recovery. But it is an ongoing everyday thing to stay healthy. Yes.
Yeah. Oh man. Wow. You're something else. So is Robin, and so is your daughter. As a totally out of the box comment, if she ever wants to identify as a guy, she's one step ahead of all of that. Guys, the name of the book is Gracyn's Song, A Journey from Facing Crisis to Finding Hope. It is a wonderful book, and it's a true book, and it's an inspiring one. You need to read it. Hey, thanks for being with us. This has been just great. By the way, our live event is almost here. It's on October the 17th. For the first time ever, we're going to record this show in front of a live audience right here in Central Florida. So we want you to come out and say hi. We'll give you a cup of coffee and a pastry or a piece of cake or something, and we'll give it to you free. And you can get some information by going to keylife.org book launch /book launch for details. We're talking to Kris DenBesten, and his book is Gracyn's Song. And if you've been with us, you've heard an amazing story. George?
Kris, there are so many helpful points, and a lot of them seem like they lead to one of the points of living life prepared. Maybe you could summarize some of those points and kind of lead into, I mean, being prepared includes listening to stories like yours, but also there were some real points of focus that you guys came up with that were important in being ready to face a crisis like this unexpectedly.
Yeah, absolutely. Like back to Gracyn's prayer where she said, I'm going to trust you no matter what. She didn't find her faith at that moment. She relied on her faith at that moment. But as a 9-year-old, she had learned a lot about the Lord and about Scripture and had prayed. And, when that crisis came along, she wasn't searching for what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? She just relied on the faith journey that she'd been on. And that would be, the same, I would say for us, for Robin and I and our family is, it was when our faith really became real, but we were prepared, because we had done study and prayer life, and, we were followers of Christ, and we just relied on what his word told us. And, that's really more so what I mean by living life prepared is, you may think you're in this Bible study for one thing, but you're really being prepared for something that you may not even know is coming. And when you reach that, and you can rely on him, and you can rely on the words that he said, and you can rely on Scripture and prayer and the prayer of your fellow believers to carry you through things like this, it never crisis happens in an instant, but your faith is a long journey. And it's just looking back, it was an amazing time of realizing that God had prepared us for whatever we face. And that's not just for us, that's for anyone listening.
I wonder if you'd speak to two different groups. One, for somebody who is maybe just recently facing their crisis, obviously you would say what's in the book, but if you were to put one thing in their hands today, and then I wonder if you'd also speak to a second group, and that's people who've already gone through their crisis and maybe they did not get the happy ending that they had been praying for. What do you say to both of those groups?
Okay. Yeah. Wow. So let me go with the second one. We actually had some great friends that lost their child in the midst of our crisis. Our situation turned out where our daughter was saved here on earth. But in reality, even though the ending wasn't the same, they know that their baby boy is in Jesus' hands, and they know that they'll see their baby boy again one day. You never want to compare faith, but their faith is just so inspiring. Our good news story here is the same as their good news story. They were both healed, just in a different way. And that's when it's, it may not have turned out the way we wanted it to, but we're still going to trust you, God. And that's what faith is all about. The number one thing is if you're in the middle of a crisis, I would say, if I could give you one thing of advice, and you're right in the middle of it, and it happens to all of us, we want to find out why. Why is this happening to me? Believe me, I'm asking that question. Why would the purest heart I know be attacked? Why is my daughter about to die? Why? We want to do that. But the most important thing we've learned in all this process is, and when we want to ask God, why is this happening? A better thing to do is ask God, what are you doing? What should I be praying for? What are you teaching me in this moment? Because it takes when we're asking why, we're all focused on ourselves and our crisis. But when we're asking what, we're turning to God and asking him what we should do next, and asking him what he's working on, and putting our faith in him, which takes us from worry, which is what we're doing when we're asking why, because it's all about worried about what's going to happen. And when we focus on him, that's the truest form of worship. I hate to keep banging the drum, but it's such a poignant example of, even if it doesn't work out the way I want it to, I'm still going to trust you. Taking our problem away from us and putting it in his hands and saying, instead of asking you why, I'm going to ask you what I should be doing. And instead of worrying, I'm going to worship you right now in the midst of this. Because that's the one place we can go where we can get a result. Worry and why doesn't get us anywhere. But what should I be praying? What are you doing? And I want to worship you in the midst of this is what it takes to make it through.
I think I'd get there, Kris, but it'd take me longer than it took you. And I'm sure you agree with us that our honesty about worry and asking why and the pain, the loss, even the anger is accepted by a very big God who understands that we are dust and sometimes are broken reeds and sometimes we don't do it right. And I know you agree with that. I suspect you had moments over those long weeks when you were very human and very not Christian.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I'm telling you about what I learned, not about what I did. I was
about to check on that.
I knew you were going to say something like that.
There was anger. There was guilt. I'm being punished for the things I've done through my daughter. All the enemy sends you so many thoughts. Your humanness sends you so many thoughts. I have to do something about this. I'm going to take control. Wait a minute. I had all of that. I hope I didn't come across that I didn't. But
no, you didn't at all. And I know you, so I know you don't. I just wanted to say that at the end so I don't feel so guilty. Kris, you are a delight. Thank you for being with and thank you for telling that story. I'm sure that gets old after a while, but you were kind enough to go over the details and to point to Jesus.
Amen.
You did that quite well.
Thank you.
God bless you, brother.
You too.
Guys, the name of the book, by the way, is Gracyn's Song. Kris and Gracyn DenBesten wrote it. We're going to come back, tell you who we're going to do it unto next week. You will be amazed. Hey, thanks for being with us during this hour. What a great time. I'm a cynical old preacher, and people think I'm kidding when I say that, and I'm not. I really have to struggle sometimes. And the thing that keeps me going are the people who are on this program, because they're the real deal, and I see them every day. But there's more than that. Sometimes we all need the story of somebody who is real, who really has gone through it, been there and done that, and has his or her nose above the water. And we interview people like that. So you thought we were doing this program for you, so we could help you live your Christian life better because you need it. That's not true. If none of you listened on the many radio stations, and if nobody subscribed to our YouTube, we'd still do this because we need this too. We need to tell our stories to each other because sometimes it gets really hard. C.S. Lewis had Aslan, the Lion of Judah, say to a little boy, and I forget which book in the Chronicles or the name of the kid, but his mother was dying, and he had asked Aslan if he could do something about his mom. And then he looked up and noticed there were tears in the lion's eyes. And then Aslan says, it is very hard sometimes, and we have to be kind to one another. We really do. And a part of that kindness is to say, look, I've been a drunk too. I've lost a child too. I've gone through a divorce too. I've had a broken heart too. And sometimes it hurts so bad, I don't know what to do with it. Let me tell you my story, and maybe it will help with yours. Kathy, who's going to be our guest next week?
Next week, our friend Dr. Hugh Ross will be with us. He's got a new book called Designed to the Core. And my reminder is this is probably the most intelligent human being we ever have on the program. So don't come half asleep. Make sure you've had a cup of coffee. Make sure your caffeine level or whatever is up, because this is one smart dude.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
But he gets the fodder down. So even.
Well, yeah, but not that low.
So we'll expect you. You are expected next week, same time, same place. And between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that, of course, gives you a wide, wide berth